there seems to be something fundamentally not nice about scooping up the house that grandpa built with his own two hands and intended to be some sort of legacy for their family. But commercial real estate doesn't get built unless it's for profit.
Right.
And so ethically, it's in a much better position.
Your network is your net worth. Come listen to some of the most successful people I know share invaluable knowledge, stories, and advice in real estate, business, and beyond. This is Weiss Advice. Whether you want to take your business or personal life to the next level, look no further. Welcome back to another episode of Weiss Advice. I am your host, Yona Weiss. Awesome to be here today with another great guest on the show. We got Dan Fradenburgh.
How you doing today, Yona?
We are doing great. I'm so glad we can finally make this happen. You have, multiple podcasts, including a brand spanking new one that was a lot of fun of me losing to you in chess and talking about real estate and chess and religion and spirituality. That was a lot of fun, actually. But you are a legend in, at least in some people's eyes, in a lot of ways. And our paths crossed on LinkedIn years ago. And I'm just grateful for the friendship that's developed, and loved for you to give a little background on who you are, how you got started I know you've done a lot of things, been a lot of places, and kind of coming to the real estate angle from a bit of a different angle than most, right?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And I'm the first one to say that this is not the path that I encourage people to take if they want to get into real estate. And so I should explain that a little bit. So I help with the CRM funnels because I used to work for web.com. And what that really meant was I was doing digital security and then also the mass marketing technology. So we're sending out 5 to 7 million emails a month, doing millions of dollars each year in revenue. And that's just the clients that I had in my CRM agency. And one of the things I'm wearing a hat that says real estate is a scam, and realestateisascam.com is a site that I own to go along with a book that I wrote. But really what it was taking the digital security perspective and applying it to what I was seeing in real estate, because we're always looking for vulnerabilities, which are where an intelligent, observant, diligent person will be paying attention and they'll still end up in deep, deep trouble. And that is what I was looking for. And that's what I wanted to write out there in real estate. Because I think a lot of people could walk away from the industry thinking it's a complete scam, but they just don't know what full-timers do to make sure they don't lose their shirts. So that's...
Well, what do you mean by that? I mean, first of all, 2 questions. You can take this each one however you want, but what do you actually mean when you say real estate is a scam, besides for being kind of a catchy, thing, gets people's attention speaking? And I'll ask you the follow-up question to that in a second.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have a background also in search engine optimization, so I knew people would be typing real estate as a scam, so that's part of it, and I'm more than willing to accept that free traffic from the engines. But one example is, as people start to become more successful in their career, they say, well, I want to have a legacy, and there aren't many ways to do it that really have the staying power of real estate. So people end up investing and getting big portfolios of properties, but they don't understand the single most basic idea of being a national level real estate investor, which is, why would you invest in your backyard unless your backyard is amazing? And so even just that part right there, you might get the idea of oh, well, the place down the street, I'm sure it's great. Oh, sure, we're having some troubles recently, but it'll turn around. It's well, why even bother when you can actually find a place where everybody and their horse are moving there and, they need a place to stay. So it makes more sense to invest there. And then the rules that are involved, the controls on your new property are the other reason why you shouldn't necessarily invest in your backyard. But really what I'm trying to say is that if there are forces at play that could make it impossible to recover your principal, then you really should know about those before you start investing. And that's really what I hope people understand, because the more people who do well in real estate, the more all of us do well in real
Sure.
estate.
And that goes with really any industry. You know, a lot of times you may think of other people as competitors, but in the truth of the matter is, you want people to succeed, because if someone gets a bad name, then that really does, unfortunately, give a bad name for kind of the whole industry, even though, it shouldn't, but it does, and it rubs off. So you should be, voting, hoping for everyone to be successful in their own way, and not come around problems, which unfortunately do come about for various reasons. But you're talking about real estate as a scam, obviously very catchy title, very catchy, eye grabbing and search engine grabbing title for a website. And the merch is great too. But my question for you is, well, then how the heck did you get into what drew you to real estate and commercial real estate specifically when you were doing, the digital stuff? And I mean, you really did answer the question already, because you said smart people invest in real estate to kind of build their legacy. But practically speaking, what led you there?
Yeah, I love that question. And actually, for over a year, I had a project where I didn't show my cards of what I was up to. It's called Figure It Out, but it's felt funny. Deliberately. Hey, I happen to have a copy of that book right here too, Figure It Out. And that was on attention to detail, just because when you're in programming and in tech, if there's something wrong, it breaks. So the only way to make sure that you can troubleshoot it and fix it is by cultivating your attention to detail. And personally, I found that in the different industries that I've worked in, hiring for attention to detail was the single most difficult thing. Every time we try to do it, it would fall on its face. But as far as how it got to my career, ended up going to real estate, I opened up that CRM agency, and I ended up finding bigger and better clients. There were a lot of people in the supplements space, the fitness space. I remember there was an oxygen concentrator company that I worked for. So a lot, a really wide variety of different businesses. But even though I would work on some sites that would have numbers that are just like saliva dripping from the side of your mouth because it's so amazing. So one of the sites, they had 1 million unique visitors to their homepage every single month. And if you could pull that off in real estate, you would be made in the shade. Those are crazy numbers for real estate, but they're great for supplements and health related, but they're not, the top of the top of the top. So anyway, I ended up having a client for a few months. He already had been flipping 10 houses a month in his brokerage and construction side of his business. And he was also coaching at the same time. And I was helping him out. And basically, after a few months, he said, okay, well, we seem to have a recurring pattern here. I'll get 2 hours of your help on a Monday. I'll get an hour on a Tuesday. I'll get nothing on a Wednesday. I'll get 6 hours on a Thursday. That's not going to work. So I'm going to buy out all 40 of your hours all week, every week. And I'm like, okay, wow, I got to find out how my boss can afford to pay me this amount of money. And I called it Figure It Out because I was figuring out, one, am I actually going to make the jump into real estate? But more importantly, is it even ethical? The fact is, I realized that pretty much all of real estate on the really, really fundamental level, like governance and whatnot, it's a mixture of finders, keepers, and king of the castle. And I don't think either of those two attitudes are acceptable in a kindergarten classroom. So the fact that we base our societies off of it is a little bit much. And spoiler alert, one part that's not in Figure It Out, but it really was the part that solidified my jump into real estate, was the term commercial real estate. I grew up around people where gentrification is a very, very real thing. They can't afford to live where they grew up just because of the, inflation, and wages not keeping up and all that sort of stuff. So there seems to be something fundamentally not nice about scooping up the house that grandpa built with his own two hands and intended to be some sort of legacy for their family. But commercial real estate doesn't get built unless it's for profit.
Right. And
so ethically, it's in a much better position. You're not taking away a family's home just because, they fell on hard times, as I've found everybody does. at some point for some sort of stint. So that's what I was figuring out, and that's like seeing my boss flipping all those houses and making just eye-watering amounts of money that made me go, it's like, you know what, I really should, stop being a reclusive tech guy, and I should get my face out there and make things happen.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. Just, it's so funny you talk about it in that direction, because it's like, you're working on the back end on websites and the tech, and just being observant and noticing what's going on what you're doing. It's like, not everyone would do that. Like, some people just, they punch their clock and just fix the, broken links and make the graphics look nice and don't pay any attention to, go back to whatever they're doing in their spare time and wasting time. Who knows what they're doing? But it takes a certain degree of curiosity, and which you certainly, I think that's one trait that I would use to describe you, certainly in many ways, that allowed you to really open yourself up to that new world. And really what that did, and what I've observed, at least from seeing you over the years, is that it opened a lot of doors, and it made new connections, which thereby started new businesses, new ideas came, podcasts, et cetera. And just one of the things that you're really good at is just networking, and meeting a lot of people. You have your chance encounters with podcasts where you're just literally taking 15, 20 minutes or whatever and just getting to know people. And then your 506B Me project, also just figuring out how people, what they want to invest in, and how they want to invest, and how they want to connect with investors. It's like, it's really, you're giving a platform for other people, which ultimately gives you clout, gives you a name, and you're, for those who are not watching the video, Dan's shaking his head so much, I'm afraid, it's going to fall off. but I mean, it's true.
It's absolutely, that was what I was up to when I first did it. I knew that as a tech guy, a relative unknown, the fact is, if you know that you're deal sponsor dependent, as I call it, okay, you're the tail, you're not the dog, you're not the person who can sign on the 5, 10, 50, $150 million loans, then that means you're basically in the draft, like in the NFL or NBA or whatever. You're saying, okay, put me on, coach. Don't leave me on the bench, that sort of thing. So the chance encounter interview, it's fairly similar to an RIA, a registered investment advisor's suitability questionnaire, or the ones that securities attorneys in general require people to use. But I was aware of the possibility of identity theft. And so I did not want my guests to come on and say, oh, yeah, I got a net worth of such, because you're just basically asking for it. So instead, I asked some questions where, like, basically the guest will hear me loud and clear. Like, I'll say, is preservation of purchasing power one of your priorities? And if you don't have a substantial net worth, then preservation of purchasing power can't really come into the equation, because you don't have anything to preserve. Mm-hmm. So that's what I did in the interview. And I was also trying to show, it's like, okay, I'm going to spend 15 minutes blasting through these basics, saying these are the members of the team, and if you don't have all of them, you're going to fail. These are the different ways that we define buy box, and if you can't communicate that, you're going to fail. So just basically going one after another, making sure that my guest understands that I understand this stuff. And then that at the same time, we're making sure that we don't spend some 2-hour marathon phone call and don't really get anything accomplished,
right,
other than, creating a friendship, which is great.
But, and some content, it's always good. Can't hurt to create more content, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's endless work in progress.
Yes, exactly. And, you mentioned the chess series, and that's one that I get a little bit coy when I start talking about it, just because it's too much fun for me. It's way too much fun. And so when I start having fun as part of business, I start feeling guilty, because I'm like, am I really helping here, or am I just having a great time? Or is it both? But I find that the relationships you can build while you're in a podcast it's really amazing because after all, most of the time when you're talking to somebody, they're sitting there messing with their phone, checking their email, multitasking, something like that.
Sometimes,
but when you sit them down on a podcast, you got full attention. Let's
Hopefully.
get this done.
Hopefully.
Great
It's
stuff.
not always the case. I've been
Right. Actually, I got a text. I'll be right back.
yeah, right.
Sorry.
A couple times I've had people on the show and I noticed they're kind of, multitasking a little bit. It's fine. It comes with the just experience, but you're absolutely right. It is a lot of fun and it's important to have that aspect, and the relationship building aspect of it is key. Who are some of because I know with your chance encounters, you've done a ton of those. I think you just mentioned this morning 360 episodes.
Yep.
That's just awesome. That's incredible. It takes a long time to do that. I mean, you're not doing it every day. If it did, that would take a year, but doing it for a few years. Who are some of, again, I know you reach out to some very random people, I think, it's not all in the real estate space whatsoever. I saw some like Broadway singer one time, and
Right.
who are the most interesting people that you've had on that show?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked, and that really dovetails into the fact that I made it so that regardless of the relationship, I make it into a podcast just to make sure that it's always worth my time and it's always worth my guests' time. And with Figure It Out, that brand, I created a dream job series, and that's where the Broadway opera singer came into play. It was anybody. Well, part of Figure It Out was realizing that I knew I had to make a career shift and figuring out what direction was that going to be in, with real estate being the most likely one. And so knowing that other people were going through the exact same thing, especially in 2020, I wanted to say, okay, well, what if you decided to really, really chase your dreams? What would that look like? What if you decided, what, I always wanted to sing on Broadway, and you decide, okay, I'm going to do it. And the thing that I think is in the way for people to pull off that sort of over the top achievement, like real life's work sort of achievement, you have to have some sort of connection with somebody who's already done it.
Yeah.
But the recurring question I ask in those dream jobs is how does somebody achieve what you've done if they have no friends, no family, and no cash to help? Okay. And the reason why I ask that is because that is the situation for people at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Full stop. Okay. They don't have friends they can count on to help them out. They don't have friends they can count on, and they definitely don't have cash that they can tap into. Now, of course, real estate is very welcoming, even if you have no cash. To be brutally honest, the people with no cash are the least welcome in real estate, and they're still welcome because you're going to be in on sweat equity, which is fantastic. But as far as like the most amazing people I've met, like that was really the point of starting podcasting, is I wanted to talk to people who knew things I didn't know. So you mentioned the Broadway opera singer. Instead of just picking one in particular, I'll just mention some of the others just because they've been so amazing. So the world's fastest reader, he's definitely on there because that's such an important skill these days, to be able to blast through content unbelievably fast. International award-winning composer, career comedians, stand-up comedians, because like some people, that's their dream, is to stand on stage and have people laugh with them instead of laugh at them. There's so many. And then inside commercial real estate, it's whenever I'm talking to somebody who has just achieved so much, it's really amazing to watch the people that have achieved what so many others are trying to, but they just haven't been able to put it together. And I've definitely interviewed people who've done $1 billion worth of deals and everywhere in between. So I can't wait for the next big set of names to keep on coming on the show.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what's amazing is you just, kind of reach out to people, right? Like, hey, I got a podcast. And I'm sure many have declined, but you get, that's part of, it's part of the job description,
Right, exactly. And even on the shorter ones, I have another 8-minute format, which is really designed for people where I kind of think they're out of my league in some situations. I'm really swinging for the fences, and I'm going like, okay, well, you can do an 8-minute format, can't you? Like you can literally leave after 15 minutes.
Right.
And, I got nothing. One who I wanted to talk to was Stephen Fry. He's the British comedian. He also does a lot of narration and things like that. He was also host of a show called QI. And I wanted to talk to him just because it's clear that he's got a truly exceptional memory. And that's what I want to talk to him about. And then, of course, other social issues, faith being one of them, because he's a quite vocal atheist. So that's something that I like. It doesn't matter whether you're a believer or a non-believer. I still want to bring that subject up and get a little bit more clarity. Kind of like how you and I found that we agree on way more when it comes to faith than what we perhaps disagree about. But
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the case with most people. But, it's unfortunate because a lot of people don't choose to find that common ground and instead choose to find the dissenting points. And, that's what leads to strife, in the whole world, to be honest.
Absolutely. And it's a media thing, first and foremost. If they highlight the disagreements and the frictions, like even in Israel, like I've been told that it's really common to be interacting with Palestinians on a daily basis in Israel.
Yeah.
So it's like clearly there's a schism between, like what people think is necessary, what people think is unnecessary, and all that kind of stuff. And like, I can't think of a hotter button topic than that one right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I did want to give you a chance to kind of talk about how you, I wouldn't say digress, but moved into what you're doing right now, which is a very fascinating part of real estate because everyone needs money, right?
Right.
And money is what really drives every single deal on the capital stack. The different parts of where money comes from in a deal is just fascinating. So how did you get into this kind of debt fund that you're working with now? And tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I've been saying, and perhaps I shouldn't continue to use this, I've been saying my wife is a discerning person. She has discerning taste. So I'm constantly in a situation where I'm like, oh, okay, well, these are the options that are available. How can I manipulate the options that are available, perhaps add parts and features that improve the options available so that we get a satisfied reaction? And so another way of saying that exactly same thing is I'm constantly optimizing and looking at things and saying, hey, how do I get all of the good sides of this with none of the bad sides of that? And part of the way that I find out what that is I hang out with smarter and smarter people. And that has led me to find that a lot of people, the big complaint they have of the last few years in commercial real estate, it's because they're tied into the equity side. And so they have a liquidity problem where what could have been 2 years, they get their capital back. It's looking a lot more like 5 to 7 or like who knows? It really depends on what happens with interest rates. But no matter what, it's a pretty scary thing. So the lending side, if you really understand arbitrage, in other words, you borrow at one rate, let's say 5%, and then you lend it out for 8 and you keep the 3, that's the basis of arbitrage. If you can pull that off, then you basically have something that behaves very well in terms of inflation. And because if the interest rates end up going up, well, you're dealing with people who aren't able to get more loans from a typical bank. But there's an art and a science to lending that I'm learning these days. But one of the biggest ones is making sure that they can actually pay the loan. They're actually a decent borrower. And then, of course, if they run into hard times, as will happen occasionally, I hear statistically over the last 40 years, it's around like 97% of the time, all the payments are done on time, no issues. And apparently that's the lawyer version of the answer.
Okay.
So like that even means like, like 1 day late is in the 3%, which, like who cares about 1 day late, right? It's as long as it's sorted out. But basically I found that if you can put your money in, get your money out quickly, you're not really waiting for liquidity events and things like that. It seems to be the ideal space to be in as long as you're an accredited investor and you can write that size of a check. So
Right.
so that's what it's what basically made me say, hey, this is the really smart move in real estate if you can pull it off. But more and more, just like most industries, I find that it's best left to the professionals
Right.
because there's so many things that you can be completely blindsided by. And it's not just government red tape either.
Sure. No, I mean, and running a mortgage company it takes a lot, of experience, right? I've known people who have done that, and it's years in the making until they really get it down to a science and an art, like you said. But it is fascinating. It's a fascinating part of the business, and to invest in that is also, it's a little bit different because when you think about investing in real estate, you don't necessarily think about investing in a debt fund or a mortgage, and then you're like, okay, that's not really real estate. I'm investing in something that invests in real estate,
Right. Right. It's absolutely
It's a little, it's a
derivative.
step, removed. So, but the arbitrage, what you're talking about, that's it. I mean, that's really what makes, any business function. And debt is not just limited to real estate. Obviously, like every business, I wouldn't say every, but most businesses run, on debt as well, have credit and et cetera. And lines of credit is what keeps them afloat.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Dan, I want to turn to what we call the final four. These are 4 questions I like to ask all my guests. And the first one for you is, what is the worst job that you ever had?
Right. So, worst job I ever had, I'd say it was one particular duty of the job that made
Mm-hmm.
it the worst. So, like the whole job, I can't say it was absolutely horrible. And what it was my first summer in college. I worked the door at a comedy club. And I know that may be surprising because I'm not the most imposing looking individual. So, usually you get these big guys at the front, and there was still a couple of big guys at the front door, but I was the smooth talking, conflict, de-escalating one. And yeah, cleaning up the washrooms as part of my responsibility. Yeah, that's not pleasant, but I sure know how to make a very clean mirror. So that's nice.
Well, skills that you learn for life. Second question, what's a book you've read that's given you a paradigm shift?
So the biggest one for me, I always viewed myself as someone where generosity is more important than having a little bit of extra savings. But I found that becoming more frugal, like as I'd been used to more tougher times, I found that sometimes it would lead me towards business pursuits. They wouldn't be the right choice. So the one I'm going to say, it's actually one that Dr. Benjamin Hardy was kind enough to send me a box of them. So if you're in the audience and you're anywhere near me, I can give you a hardcover copy of this book to a good home. It's called 10X is Easier Than 2X.
That's great.
By Dr. Benjamin Hardy. He's the writer, and then Dan Sullivan is the headliner, but it's pretty clear that Dr. Benjamin Hardy is the actual person who's putting pen to paper, so to speak. But the takeaway from it is that it's only going to be a small difference in your bottom line. It's a 2X idea, and you need to say no to those ideas because you need to leave room for the 10X ideas where it's just going to change everything about your business. So that one right there is the most recent one I can think of that included a paradigm shift.
Yeah, that's fascinating. What's actually interesting is that I think in the past 3 or 4 episodes, maybe not in a row, but definitely in the past several episodes, we've had a book by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Either that one, we had Who Not How mentioned recently, and then The Gap in the Game, which is another one. All 3 have been mentioned in the past several episodes that we've done. So I think that to me is just fascinating. This individual has certainly had an influence, a great influence. So yeah, if you are anywhere near Ottawa, Canada, which I don't envy you for that, but if you are,
then this time of year is not bad, but other than that, it's
that's true. Then reach out to Dan for a copy of that book. That's awesome.
Absolutely. And you can follow Dr. Benjamin Hardy on LinkedIn as well. He's highly active on there, and it's a great person to build a relationship with.
No, very cool. Awesome. We'll make sure to do that. Third question is, what's a skill or talent that you would like to learn? And I know you're an extremely skilled and talented person, so this might be difficult for you to answer.
I appreciate you saying that. Yeah. So, yeah, I got an episodic memory, and it makes it really easy to memorize stuff for me compared to most people. There are some things where that's not the case. One of them would be Chinese. Learning Chinese was definitely hard work for me. So, like, I felt very normal in that process. And I'm doing it again right now, as you know, with chess. I don't feel I'm a natural at chess at all, even though I know I can memorize openings with very little effort, but I just find that my skill building in general seems to be slow. But the one skill that I'm working on right now that I'm so grateful for my co-founder Joe Cook for being able to see this, it's how to be a great lender, how to be a skilled lender. What does it mean? Like, I've always sized people up on multiple different levels, and it shows up in the chance encounters and things like that. But when you're lending other people's money, you really have to be crystal clear. Is this person who they say they are? Is this property what they say it is? Are these reports actually valid? There's so much verification that seems very similar to digital security. And that's the skill that I'm learning, because I came from the syndication side, and so that it was understanding the business models and underwriting and basically pro formas, how we're actually going to do the value add and make this property make more money, reduce the taxes through cost segregation, things like that. But the lending part was a big question mark in my head, and that's what I'm getting.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. Fourth and final question, what does success mean to you?
All right. So success for me, I've been working from home with this agency since 2011. And so that is a huge part of what I'd actually call success, because, my kids have been born since I started working from home. And so the solidarity in this house that my kids get to experience, knowing that daddy is there, and, push comes to shove, like, if you need a hug, I'm right here. That is the ultimate form of success. And, like, I lived in Taiwan for 15 years, so I know what it's like to live someplace completely different from where you're used to. Like, that's definitely another form of success. But it's one that it's not that appealing for me, because the family is number one. But it's not having to be told what to do all day, every day is wrapped up in success. Being able to make your own decisions. It's the numbers in your bank. I've seen too many on paper millionaires to, like, they're, cutting coupons, tightening the belt.
For sure.
It's like, that is not my definition of success anymore. And that's why I really like talking to people about what their actual goals are, to see, what's out there that fits you a whole lot better.
Nice way to put it. I don't think I've really had anyone kind of describe it in that way, which is why I asked the question, because everyone has their own perspective on it. So appreciate yours. And I'm just grateful for you to join me on the show. Finally, it's been a long time coming, and I definitely think we got a lot of value from this episode. But for our listeners who would like to reach out to you or find you, where can they do that?
Excellent. LinkedIn is definitely the best way to reach me. I got a pretty distinct last name. It makes me super duper easy to find. Of course, you can also check out Amazon.com. I've got 3 different books that are on business skill building related subjects, and real estate is a scam. It's just one of them, specific for doing syndications, the different things that I think that gurus and mentors tend to gloss over at the student's peril.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to put all that in the show notes. And again, thanks, Dan. It's been a pleasure. And thank you to our listeners for joining us all the way to the end. Once again, you guys are awesome. Thanks for joining and tuning in. And remember, until next time, the best advice comes only when you ask. Real quick, I have one question for you. Did you like this episode? If you did, I want to ask you a huge favor. See, the biggest thing that helps this podcast grow and that will spread this message to the whole world is that if you leave a review, a rating, and subscribe to the podcast. What that does is it basically tells the platforms that this podcast is out on is that you like my stuff and I'm doing something right. So take a few seconds out of your day, hit that subscribe button, leave a rating or review. I would be extremely grateful. Also, I want to hear from you guys. So I want to hear some feedback. If you have any questions for future episodes, please find me on LinkedIn. Send me a DM, a connection request, Yona Weiss, and I'd love to hear from you.